Good afternoon, y'all. This is Ned over at My Philippine Dreams, running solo because Michelle is 12,000 miles on the opposite side of the planet. Oh, no, I'm not alone. Actually, we have Ben Ives here, and Ben is the president of RapidVisa.com, which is the largest online visa application company in the world, I believe. Is that true, Ben?
Yeah, that's true. In our niche for family visas, we're the largest.
And you guys have processed about how many, and this isn't going to be about Rapid Visa, but just wondering, how many visas have you guys processed since you started?
We've done over 26,000. We may hit 27,000 by now.
Oof, that's a lot of visas.
Yeah, it's like a small city worth of people we've brought here.
And Ben is actually in Las Vegas, and is how many Filipinos approximately in Las Vegas?
There's about 115,000 here. You can't throw a rock without hitting one.
That's a lot of Filipinos. Okay. Now, Ben is kind enough, and a quick disclaimer, I've actually done work for Ben in the past, but I'm getting no financial remuneration or a possible raise because of this video. He's just kind enough to come on and talk about this. We get a lot of inquiries at our channel about relational visas, CR, spousal visas, K-1 fiance visas. Now, my question to you is, what's the easiest type of relational visa for someone who's gone overseas and met somebody and they want to get married? What's the easiest way to do that?
Well, certainly the easiest is the K-1 visa. It's not necessarily the cheapest, but it is the easiest, quickest.
Okay, so the K-1 fiance visa, and some people are probably familiar with those terms. The spousal visa, if you get married outside, if you get married in the foreign country, you have to go for the CR1 visa, right? Spousal visa?
Well, that's right. If you're already married, then the K-1 is not an option. So, really your marital status is going to determine which visa you're going to pick. Of course, if you're not married, you could always get married and then do the spousal visa. But if you're already married, then you have no choice. The K-1 is not an option. You got to do a spousal visa.
Got to do a spousal visa. And basically, the K-1 visa, that's that 90-day window you have, with 90-day fiance thing?
Yeah, exactly. The 90 days is you're required to get married within 90 days of your fiance's arrival in the United States. So that clock starts ticking when you enter the port of entry, it's called, which is just the first place you enter the United States. Once they stamp that passport, that's the 90 days. And it's strict. It's a hardcore date if you go past it. If you go 91 days even, then you have to do some different things, and it's going to cost you some money, and you got a problem. So yeah, you need to get married within 9 days to enter in the country.
All right. Some people ask, do you have to get married? What happens if you don't?
Well, you have to get married, or she has to leave. I say she. I'll probably say that a lot, but obviously it applies. It's gender neutral. Yeah, if you don't get married in the 90 days, she becomes out of status from that moment. Now, they're not going to come knock on your door probably, but you are out of status, and you do have problems. So, but it's not really meant to be a try before you buy thing. I mean, that's why you have to sign a letter of intent. You can't. You're not supposed to just use it to say, hey, let's try it. She can't get a tourist visa. We'll come on a 90-day, but we probably won't get married. You can do that. And we have people ask about it now and then. As long as she left within the 90 days, you wouldn't have, you wouldn't have done anything wrong. The problem is you can only do two fiance visas in your lifetime, and that does count whether you get married or not. So you are chipping away at your ability if you do that, and so we wouldn't suggest it. But yeah, you're supposed to get married or she leaves.
So an applicant you can only file 2 applications in your lifetime if you're staying in America.
Yeah, that's right. You can only have 2 fiance visas applications in your lifetime. After that, you got to ask for a waiver. I mean, you can ask for a waiver from anything on anything. It's going to be expensive, and high likelihood it may be denied. I just don't want to say, no, there's a hard limit. And then somebody will come along and say, well, I did it 3 times. Like, well, yeah, if you want to spend a lot of money and get a waiver, maybe you could get around it, but, it's going to cost you basically. Oh, and let me say, I should have said at the beginning, my little disclaimer, I'm not a lawyer. I'm a software developer by trade. Rapid Visa is not a law firm. So, we've done more than any lawyer in America for sure. But I wouldn't want to mislead anybody. We're not a lawyer. nothing I say is going to be legal advice. It's just going to be based on our experience of doing over 26,000 of these.
Okay, thank you for that. I appreciate that. All right, since you brought up cost and time, typically on a K-1 fiance visa, what kind of time period and what kind of costs are we looking at?
Well, we see about 6 months. I mean, you know, we always say about 6 months. It's a nice round number. The range would be, we've seen them done in as short as 4 months from the time application till the time, you know, she has the visa in hand. But that's not common, and you shouldn't hope for that. And then we've seen them go 7, 8 months. Very rarely do they go longer than that, and that would indicate you've had some kind of problem with the paperwork, you know, where you had to send more information or something. These horror stories about a year and all that, that's just where there was a train wreck with the paperwork, or there's political unrest in that country. We saw that in Tunisia, you know, when the embassy closes or protests. So there's a lot of variables. But, you know, based on real world experience, we see them routinely done in 6 months, you know, maybe 7. And that's a real number. That's not a guess. We got, you know, again, this, you know, it's not about rapid visa, just for general information, but we have no reason to fudge that number. It's pretty accurate if you do all the paperwork right.
So 4 to 8 months, and the costs that you're looking at total?
The filing fee recently went up back in December to from $340, and again, we're talking about the K-1, different petitions of different prices, but the K-1 fiance visa went up from $340 filing fee to $535. So if you're doing it yourself, it's going to cost you $535 to file with the CIS. Now, you're going to have a few more fees along the way. You're going to have an embassy fee, which is about $235, depending on the country, and then you're going to have the medical exam fee, which varies real widely from $100 to $300, again, depending on the country, because that's just going to be a private physician in the local country who has a deal with the embassy. So that can vary widely. And then other little things people don't think about is obviously you're going to need a plane ticket. And if you're going to accompany your fiance to the interview, you're going to need your plane ticket and time off work. And there are some more minor fees, like the alien will need a passport. There's always a fee for that. They're going to need a background check. There's sometimes or many times a little fee for that. So there's some nickel and dime things here and there to go along with it.
Okay. As guys are applying for this, what are some common disqualifiers, some roadblocks that disqualify people?
That's a great question. The biggest thing we see, and we handle a lot more than just the Philippines, but the Philippines is this country for fiance, biggest country in the world for fiance visas, far surpassing even Mexico. Let me speak to Philippines. Number one, Philippines is the only country that doesn't allow a joint financial sponsor for the K-1. So you have to meet an income requirement to sponsor either a fiance or a spouse. And every other country, you know, if you don't meet that requirement, you can get a joint sponsor, which is kind of like a co-sponsor, you know, somebody who will sign their name, who has a good income. Manila, the Philippines, the Manila embassy, they do not allow it. So you need to meet the income requirement. That's one hurdle. Beyond that, you know, trouble spots are really people trying to leave stuff off. For instance, you know, we get a guy, I mean, this is almost a verbatim, I'm not making this up. We know a guy said, yeah, you know, I was married to that girl back in 1962 in Arizona, and I don't have the divorce certificate, and I don't even remember the dates, and, you know, I'm just going to leave it off. Well, he got an RFE, that's a request for evidence, where they want the information, and he ended up having to track that down. So that's a common problem, is don't leave stuff off. The funny thing is, we always sit there and we want to ask ourselves, why does the government ask these questions if they already know the answer? Because they seem to always know. Every time a guy leaves off a marriage or leaves something off, they seem to come back and say, well, you know, we happen to know that you were married back in 1962. Where's the divorce certificate? So I guess they ask the question, you know, in case they don't have it in the records, but they're going to do a background check. And once you start leaving stuff off, now you put yourself in a good light, because your petitions are going on the we don't trust this guy pile. And I just made that up, but yeah, that's a common problem. Look, don't leave stuff off. You're going to have to show all your scars. I know I've had many guys tell me straight up, look, you know, I told her about my last marriage, but I didn't tell her about the other one back in the 80s or whatever. We were only married 3 months, and I just didn't want to mention it to her. And so they don't want to put it on the form. So many times it's not that they're trying to hide it from the government. They just haven't disclosed it. So look, you're going to have to bare your soul. That's a common problem. People want to leave off a conviction of some kind, you know, a criminal conviction or a past marriage. Those seem to be two problems that people kind of want to leave off, usually because they haven't shared that information with the fiance. And our recommendation is don't do it because, you know, obviously we don't know. If people leave stuff off, we don't know about it either. So we don't know how many times somebody left something off and the government didn't catch it. Does that happen? Yeah, it probably does. But our advice is, man, be honest, be brutally honest, and that will save you trouble. So finances and omissions from the application are kind of the number one thing that we see. And then farther down the list would be actually issues with the alien having a criminal thing or a past marriage that they didn't disclose. They always find this stuff. Again, I don't have evidence to support always, but it does cause trouble when they find these omissions.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that, Ben. Also, you mentioned income requirements. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, the income requirement can be a bit confusing. For the K-1 Fiance Visa, which is technically a non-immigrant visa, non-immigrant meaning basically it doesn't give you a green card directly. The income requirement is 100% of the poverty level, which changes yearly. Right now it's $16,240. So you have to show an income of $16,240 for if there's two in your household. So it goes by household size. If there's two, meaning you and alien, the two of you, $1,640. Now, if you got children, it goes up. It goes up about $4,000 per person. So, you know, if you add a child, now you're up to $20,000 approximately. But let me say, that is for the K-1. Now, once you get her here, she's got to apply for what's called the adjustment status to get the green card after you're married. And then it goes up to 125%. So it's kind of an odd little deal. It's like you can get her into the country for $16,000. But if you want her to stay, you're going to have to make 125% of the poverty level, which is $20,000 if there are no children. And of course, if there are children, it goes up from there. So that's kind of an odd little quirk. The pitfall, though, I would say with the income is that income is what you're claiming and basically what you're paying tax on, to make it simple. Of course, taxes are complicated, and I'm not a tax expert, but you can't be the guy, and we get them all the time. And I don't mean to knock anybody, but you get a guy who will say, "Look, I made $100,000 last year, but I run my own business, and I'm writing off a lot of stuff, and I'm not going to report that as income because I got to pay tax on it." Well, sorry, but if you don't report it as income, you don't get to show it. So if you made $100,000 doing your business, whatever it is, but you only reported to the government that you made $6,000, then $6,000 is what they're going with. You can write letters and jump through whatever hoops you want. Doesn't matter. If you didn't report it as taxable income, then they're not going to consider it. So we have had lots of cases where we have a self-employed guy saying, "Look, you know, I live in a nice house. I'm driving a new truck. I got a business. I'm making good money, but I report very little on my taxes because I got a sharp bookkeeper." And the answer is they end up, after fighting and screaming and complaining, they end up having to get a joint sponsor. So a guy who's maybe making a six-figure income has to go grovel to his brother or somebody else to be a joint sponsor.
And if it's the Philippines, they can't do that, right?
Yeah, and you can't even do that in the Philippines. Well, you can if it's a spouse. If you're already married, you can use a joint sponsor in the Philippines as a spouse. But for a fiance visa, no, you're stuck. You've got to go back. One tactic that has worked is they want to see your tax return. So you go back and amend your tax return if you're in that situation for the previous year to show that you did in fact make, something over the limit, 30,000 or 40,000 or whatever. You amend that, you file the amended tax return, then you give that amended tax return to the government to show that, of course, you're going to owe some tax. But that's a way you can get it done. And again, I'm not a tax expert, but bottom line is if you're not paying tax on it, it doesn't count.
What about assets? Because people ask me about that also.
Yeah, okay, assets is a great question. The rules say you can use assets, but they only value them at 1/3 of the value. So, if you've got a $75,000 asset, whether that's equity in your house or a piece of land or a 401k or whatever, even if it's cash money, they only value it at 1/3. So if you got a $75,000 asset, they'll give you credit for $25,000, which may be enough to put you over the limit. Now, let me say though, it gets tougher with assets. They look critically on assets. You know, typically if they're foreign assets, they're not going to count them at all. You know, you're asking for a fight when you start with assets, I guess is what I'd say, unless they're substantial. You can't use your primary vehicle. So you say you've got a car, it's worth $30,000, it's paid for. Sorry, unless it's your second car, you can't use it. So it's tricky. It's better to just have income, even if you have to go get a job temporarily. You can always quit it when she gets back. But yeah, technically you can use assets. If you've got substantial assets, you've got a couple $100,000 in a 401k, yeah, you'll probably be fine. But if your assets are marginal, it might be a struggle.
Okay. And they have a lot of like leeway and discretion when it comes to approving that the finances.
Well, they do, and that's the frustrating thing of dealing with the government is that you know, they can decide. They can just decide they don't want to accept your assets for whatever reason. Could be they don't think you can convert them quickly enough. Could be it's your primary home and they don't believe you would sell it if you had financial difficulties. You know, they don't really explain the reasoning. But again, as I said, if you're down to using assets and they're not substantial, you know, be ready. Be ready to draw this out. And these are the kind of things that draw it out. You know, we said the average that we see 6-7 months. You start trying to use assets and all that. If your assets are good and solid, you probably can get it done. But now you've blown out of the water that 6-month deal. Now you're looking at 8-9 year. Might take you 18 months if you got to have a lot of back and forth because they do everything by mail. Nobody's going to call you and say, explain this asset. They're going to send you a letter, put your petition on the bottom of the pile again. You're going to respond to the letter. And then when they get around to it, they're going to go back to it, send you another letter. And anytime they send a letter, you've lost a month. You know, you get one letter, you've lost a month. If you got to have 3 letters back and forth, you've lost 90 days. So it really drags it out. You know, if there's any way you can have just a good solid income as opposed to assets, that's going to be better. But of course, if that's not your situation, it's not. Just bring a little more patience with you. What we tell people is, look, if you're persistent and you're honest, you will probably get this done. You just gonna have to be patient. You can't, you know, the guy who works down at the post office and makes $45,000, he's going to sail right through because they've got a W-2 from a government agency. It's a rock solid income. Boom, he goes through. The guy who's self-employed, you know, I can tell you this myself firsthand. Trying to do anything when you're self-employed or own a business is always hard because they're always suspicious that you're cooking the books, that your numbers aren't accurate since you are the guy. You know, I create my own W-2. I mean, my CPA does really, but I have control of it. So it's, you know, everybody's going to be suspicious when I show them my W-2. They're going to be like, yeah, right, it's your company. How do we know this is true? So that's just a fact that all self-employed people already face. So if you are self-employed, just be ready for that.
Okay. All right, Ben, another question we get quite a bit is guys being concerned about financial liability when they bring their fiance over, when they get married, and they say, I guess I have to take care of her for like 10 years now or something.
Yeah, it's a real concern, you know, I mean, it kind of goes without saying that this is not a venture you should get into lightly. You know, legally the way it works is when you sign that affidavit of support, which you always do, and let me, as an aside, even if you have no income and you get a joint sponsor, you still personally have to sign one yourself. So you're always liable as the sponsor. What it means is you're responsible until that person is paid into taxes basically for 40 qualifying quarters is the way they would say it. So basically 10 years, if they work for 10 years, work and pay taxes for 10 years, or what usually happens quicker, if they become a citizen. So one of those two things has to happen before you're off the hook. So, you know, the best thing to do is after 3 years, she can become a citizen, she or he, if you immigrated through marriage. Best thing to do is make that person a citizen as quick as possible, which would be 3 years. That's how you're going to get off the hook the quickest. Otherwise, it's going to be 10 years. But what does it mean? Well, it means that if that person went and got on public assistance of some kind, you know, food stamps or who knows what, subsidized housing, then theoretically they can come after you to pay that back. Do they do it? Honestly, in all the years we've been doing this, I've never heard of it happening. But it doesn't mean that I would hear of it. I mean, there's no reason they would call me. So it could be happening all the time. I don't know. What I do know is not something you hear about. But theoretically, yeah, you're on the hook. And look, let's face it, I think we can all agree with that. We don't want, you know, none of us want to be supporting some immigrant that some guy brought over and then he kicked her out. And now me and you and everybody and the rest of us taxpayers are paying to support that person because they have no means to support themselves. So the reasoning is sound of why they do it. Now, obviously, what happens is the guy says, "Look, I brought her here, and soon as she got here, she hit the ground running. It's not my fault. I was sincere. Why am I responsible? Hey, you know, I feel for you, but bottom line is you're responsible. I mean, perhaps you've been victimized, but it's not going to be right for the taxpayers to pay that. So yeah, at the end of the day, it's a serious commitment that you're signing, and this is why it's difficult sometimes to get a co-sponsor. You know, you go ask your buddy, "Hey, can you sign for my wife or fiance?" If he's got a head on his shoulders, he's going to say, "Wait a minute, what am I committing to here?" Because you might love her and think she hung the moon. He doesn't know the girl, and he may be reluctant to sign. Now, having said that, though, we see joint sponsors all the time. There are people that do it. They tend to be family member, you know, mother, father, brother, sister, something like that. They don't have to be, though legally it can be anybody. But yeah, it's a serious commitment. My advice is get her naturalized as soon as possible, so that you get off the hook for that, because you never know what's going to happen.
So it's not like the person actually has to pay payments to the spouse.
No, it doesn't work
it's just
that way.
public charge.
Exactly, and that's a common question. No, it doesn't mean you know she can leave you, and now you're writing her a check.
Okay.
Now, of course, you know, the court. If she leaves you and goes to court and you divorce, yeah, I mean, there's all those other things having to do with alimony and child support, whatever. Any of that and all of that could come into play. But no, you're not writing a check to support somebody. You know, at least not automatically. Again, can the alien go to court and say, "Hey, he signed saying he would support me"? You know, yeah, who knows? Anything's possible, I suppose. Although I haven't heard of that happening.
Okay. And finally, free resources. What are some free resources that people can utilize to do more research on K-1?
Well, you know, the very best resource is the USCIS site itself. So that's U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Service. It's uscis.gov. There's tons of good resources there. You know, it's a government website, so it's a little, you know, detailed, involved, and sometimes esoteric. But to their credit, they made an attempt. They've updated it several times lately. What I suggest, if you're going to do, is figure out what the primary form is for your petition type. For a fiance visa, that's a form called I-129F. Find that form, and then on that website, and then a separate document that's located in the same place will be the instructions for that form. And these instructions are really quite detailed. You know, I got to give the CIS credit. If you read through the instructions very carefully, it's dry and it's boring. But if you really pay attention and read it, you can learn an awful lot. Just reading the instructions, you'll know more about a K-1 visa than most people on these forums. You know, of course, sites like ours, you know, rapidvisa.com, we have a lot of information out there. And then there are some good forums, you know, Visa Journey, just to give them a shout out. That's a pretty good forum. You can find a lot of good information out there. But what I would caution you, if you're going to any site that's not a government site, be careful what you're reading, because it may be completely accurate when it was written, but things change often. You know, example is the fees just changed in December. So, you know, a guy who writes a post because he just brought his wife here and he wrote a post last fall, well, you know, the information may already be outdated. The forms, the I-129 have changed from 2 pages to, I think it's 17 or something now. So, and that's just been since December. So things change often and rapidly. So just because somebody did this a year ago or 2 years ago, or they've done it a couple of times, unless they've done it recently in the last, you know, 30, 60 days, it's likely that things have changed. So that would be my caution. That's what people get themselves in trouble is they read a forum, they read a post from a guy that's 1, 2, 5 years old, and they all of a sudden think they know what they're doing. And you know, that guy's situation may be different. Things may have changed since then. So that's my cautionary tale. We see that a lot. People come to us after they've messed it up themselves, or maybe they were already with us, but then they read something that contradicts what we're telling them, and then they want to talk about it, which is all great. But again, things move fast, especially with the new administration we have now. They seem to be tweaking things and changing things. And so go to the USCIS.gov. Now that's for the embassy, for the first step, USCIS. Then you also have the embassy stage. So I would go to the embassy website. Every embassy, every U.S. embassy has a website, and it will explain their interview process. You know, it's a little digging, it's a little research. That's why some people choose to use a processor like us, or even an attorney, issues because they don't want to weed through the weeds. But you know, back when I did it, I brought my wife here from the Philippines. I did it myself. You know, it was a lot of research and minutia, but you know, kind of as a software developer, I guess it's one of the things I almost perversely enjoy, is getting into the weeds on these kind of details. And so for me, it wasn't too bad. And if you're like me, if you don't mind the minutia and detail, you can absolutely do it yourself. Just be careful, take your time, and you know, be honest, and don't leave anything out, and you'll do okay.
Okay. And I'm going to list out those free resources that are available down in the video description box on this. All right. Well, and if anybody has any additional questions, we can just add them down in the comments section, and we can try to address those one by one. We'll do our best. Maybe you can swing by our YouTube site and answer some of those. You guys also have your own YouTube site, right?
Yeah, we've got a YouTube page, and then of course our website, and we've even got a forum called it's visacommunity.com, where people can ask questions. So, you know, obviously we're a for-profit company, but we don't. It's, you know, a common philosophy on the web that successful companies try to adhere to is that if you're going to be a good operator on the web, if you're going to be part of the community, you really have to give back. You know, we, like any company, obviously we have to make money to pay the bills, but we do try to put a lot of good resources out there. We do have the forum. You know, we have a Facebook site also. Just search Rapid Visa, you'll find it. A lot of people ask questions there. You know, obviously, again, we're a for-profit business. Obviously, we can't take you through it step by step how to do it yourself, because you know that just takes up time and labor, and you know that's eats into our business, just to be blunt. But if you've got a few questions about things, you're stuck on something, or just how, you know, should I do this, should I do that? You know, absolutely. Just remember, we're not lawyers, but we're happy to share, you know, what we know with you, and as well as others. There are other people, and there's some good folks out there on the forums who really just want to help. You know, and then there are also the trolls, of course, who are going to give you bad advice or tell you shouldn't, why you bring in an immigrant here too. So. But, you know, there are a lot of good people in the community trying to do the right thing, and certainly, you know, don't be afraid to ask questions.
All right. Well, Ben, thank you very much. I'm looking at Ben right now. I really appreciate your time in answering all these questions. Again, if anybody has any questions, any comments, leave them down in the comments section. Links to all the resources that Ben brought up will be down in the video description box. This is Ned.
And this is Ben.
And we are My Philippine Dreams. We'll see you next time.
All right, thanks. Enjoyed it.